Good morning and welcome back to another We Are Sunderland morning briefing in partnership with the Farm Museum and Cospex Opticians. We are still running our competition over on We Are Sunderland. If you subscribe now, you can. It's obviously £1 for just 6 months worth of subscription, and you could be in with a chance of winning one of 3 pairs of hospitality tickets for the final day of the season. That competition set to close on April the 11th, I believe, at 4 p.m. So just under 2 weeks before that closes. So make sure you head over there, subscribe, and you could be in with a chance of winning those tickets. Good morning, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm not bad yourself, mate.
Yep, spot on. Football's nearly back. We've got stuff to write about again, and the football's nearly back. I might not be saying that at come the full-time whistle after Cardiff, but fingers crossed. I mean, we heard from Mike Dodds earlier in the week, and he sort of reiterated Dan Neil's point that it was, he was conscious of answering, taking the positives from the international break, using it as a reset. But he did say, that players did need that break. Job in particular, one of those who they gave a bit of additional time off to. What are your sort of thoughts heading into Cardiff this week?
Yeah, I think he wouldn't necessarily come out and say it outright as such, but like we've spoken about quite a few times, it has undoubtedly been an important break for Sunderland just to snap that streak. I know they obviously got the draw, but the mood around the place has been so low over the last couple of months, really, hasn't, since the turn of the year. Just a break from all. Some players going out, getting a fresh bit of scenery, going on international duty. Trey Hewitt, Dan Ballard, good result the other night in Scotland. So it's very much been needed, but the proof will be in the pudding tomorrow, won't it, when Sunderland go to Cardiff, which is a tough game. Cardiff are, mugs. They've been doing quite well recently outside of the Derby defeat before the break themselves. So it's a tricky fixture for them, and it's an important weekend. We've said it all along. Yes, there's a 9-point cushion there, but you still probably need a win just to make sure. It would still be probably a big ask for all the teams below them to accrue the points and overturn them over these 8 games. But if you were to go this weekend, where there's double games, not pick up a win, and then I think it's Bristol City next weekend, teaming in around you. If you weren't to win one of those, then you're going into Leeds and West Brom back to back away, which is tough at the best of times. All of a sudden, that 9-point gap could half, and then if you're going into those final 3 games, 2 of which are against teams down there fighting in Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday, all of a sudden you could find yourselves just dragged into a completely unnecessary scrap. So the sooner they can get, I think a win will be enough to do it. The sooner they can get that, the better. Then we were kind of just talking before we started this, weren't we? It's interesting then if you do get that win, the season probably is completely null and voided by that point because you're just sitting around in mid-table. But at the moment, you probably now take that, given the way that the last sort of 2 months has gone, but 3 months really. The managerial changes didn't work, the form's gone out the window, the injuries that have built up, everything's just gone against them over the last sort of 3 months. A lot of it self-inflicted, which we've openly said, but they just need to get that win just to make sure that they're across the line, ease any doubts over this last month of getting dragged into something that they shouldn't be getting dragged into. And then you get away in the summer and have a big rethink, like we've said again so many times, about how big of a summer that's going to be.
Yeah, it certainly feels like, I know any championship season certainly feels like a long one, but it feels like ever since, Mowbray's departure, if I'm being honest, that it's felt like we've had about 10 seasons rolled into one. Over the course of the international break, obviously one of those reasons why it feels so long, the Black Cats bar debacle, the club's seemingly drawn a line under that. They've carried out an internal investigation. And I think there's been a sense of frustration from fans, hasn't there? In the sense of that, that they're generally no further forward in terms of how that came about. And the club said that they can't sort of, say any more because of sort of employment laws and things like that. But that's one of the things. I think that's quite a big talking point, isn't it, this week from, the meeting with the Red and White Army.
Yeah, that, and obviously the head coach, brief update coming out of that. The Black Cats Bar one is one that's just, like I said before, that'll unfortunately be around for a long time.
Yeah.
Just given the nature of what it was. I get that people now probably be at the point of saying we should be moving on from things like that, but the update, that internal investigation was something that a lot of people have been keen to see what the outcome is. Like you say, sort of employment laws restrict entirely what can come out of it, but you have to then just you have to almost go along with the club and saying that it's been dealt with, because there's no way around that, you know. Unfortunately, like I said, I mean, those images and what happened, it's going to take more than just a statement in a meeting for that to truly be put to bed in a lot of people's hearts, I would imagine. Their coach one was interesting. I thought that it would, you know, it's particularly with the backroom staff being allowed to come in. I think Mike Dodds touched on that yesterday as well in the press conference, didn't he? That Michael Beale would have been allowed to do that after his initial phase of coming down by himself. But that is something that will probably be key with any head coach or potential head coach coming in. You know, can they bring at least one of their own members of staff? Because Beale touched on it quite a few times about it. You could almost sense the sort of isolation of him being coming in and not having his person or his team to bounce ideas off. And that's no slight on the likes of Dodds or Michael Proctor who are in there. But you can understand that going into somewhere new, having someone there that you're comfortable with and familiar with just makes things a lot easier. So that's something that I think will probably be welcome in the summer for the new head coach, whoever that may be.
Yeah, I did find that a little bit strange, that one line. Again, I know it's from the minutes of meeting, so you don't know how it's truly being said or how it's been interpreted, but Christian Speakman just saying, obviously, if there are a decent recommendation, then there should be no problems with that. Obviously, we've seen coaches come in who are viewed as being good on the football circuit. So it's a particularly sort of interesting one from my point of view, given Mike Dodds' situation. I asked him earlier in the season, you know, in the unlikely event, I said that at the time, but, you know, we're halfway through and he hasn't won a game yet. But say in the unlikely event that he was to lose every single game of his, managerial stint in interim charge, obviously nobody would wish that upon anyone. But what does that mean for him? He said, look, I'm not stepping up to be sacked. So again, he was asked at his press conference earlier this week. The general consensus is that he will sort of resume first team coaching duties, whoever that may be. He said that he's not concentrating on that though, or, you know, he was asked again about sort of where things are at after I asked him last week. So it is a very, very strange time, I think, to be covering the club from that perspective, because I think there's a bit of a general consensus that they're waiting for the summer for someone. There's been talk of that being Will Still, given that he'd only have, I think, is it a year left on his contract, something like that, a Ream, which would mean a cheaper buyout if they were to pursue him. But I find the comments interesting that they say that they're not against hiring a coach who's employed at the minute. But you think the way that things have been set up and how the season sort of petering out a little bit, you would have thought that on one side, it would be a good opportunity to bring them in now before the end of the season, give them a run of games, let them have an input on which players are likely to be here next year. Just a little bit of a grace period heading into next year. I know that you'll likely have a pre-season, but say you don't. You know, the longer it goes on in the summer, the more and more question marks are going to be levied at those above about, well, you've wanted to take your time with this appointment, but if it trudges on and the summer and pre-season starts, then you're just sort of leaving yourself open, aren't you, for questions?
Yeah, it's a very good point. You know, I mean, whoever does come in, it needs to be as early as possible in terms of when the season finishes, if that is the way they're going to go. I know Mike Dodds has said if they have the right candidate now, he doesn't expect to be sitting in the seat the next day, sort of thing. I would expect Dodds to still be to do these final 8 games. I don't think anything will change.
Yes,
but you would like to see them being very proactive in terms of then having your head coach sort of named or singled out or know who you're getting sort of within days of the end of the season. You know, that's happened before. I think it happened with Jack Ross, didn't it? When he first came in, he was appointed in the May going into the next season. You need something like that, so you know, right, this is what's happening, so then you can map out the summer and get as long as possible the new head coach going in with his new players. In terms of Dawes, like you said, it's another strange one because he's openly said that he wants to go and take a role at some point. It is for him. At the moment, it's probably not helping him. So then does he drop back down into just being a first team coach with Sunderland? Does he decide that after this third spell, it might be time for him to go and pursue opportunities elsewhere, depending on if, like we said, just a new head coach bringing in his new member of staff. You know, there's a lot of sort of spinning plates there, isn't there, that need to be ironed out as soon as possible. as soon as Sunderland really are confirmed safe in the Championship next season, so they can really have a good go and get things right in the summer and aligned, and make a better fist of what they've done this year, because the second half of the season just hasn't been good enough at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's just the head coach thing either. I think certainly over the last couple of months, it's felt like Sunderland are juggling. They're spinning a lot of plates. You're approaching the end of the season, and by the time this video goes out, we'll have a piece going up on sort of contract situations. And Mike Dodds has said that he'll have an input. But again, you're on the brink of going into next year with, you don't know who the head coach is going to be. You don't know what his views will be on certain players. Obviously, in this day and age, you have head coaches do a lot of research on squads, much like they would say in preparation for games. But it's felt like the club, I don't think they've been in danger of, relegation, but it just feels like they're staying afloat at the minute. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it just feels like that they're juggling a lot at the minute, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's the head coach situation. There's pretty big. You could argue there's a pretty big turnover of players needed, or certainly significant investment.
Yeah.
If you're going to lose your key player in Jack Clark, which we expect to happen, the forward situation's been there for 18 months almost.
Yep.
The holding midfield situation has been there for 18 months almost. You mentioned it there. There's contracts. There's players who are going to leave the club in the summer out of contract anyway. There's players who might leave beyond Clark who might be sold as well. It's a big summer. We've said it a lot, and we'll say it a lot over the coming weeks when we get into the summer as well. This is a big summer for Sunderland and for the ownership group to determine how they're going to go about things and what comes next. Are they serious about wanting to get Sunderland back into the Premier League under this 5-year plan? Because this summer's going to say a lot about whether they are or not. They're halfway through that 5-year plan now, and they're now further away from promotion to the Premier League. They're closer to going back down to League One than what you'd consider them being promoted to the Premier League at this moment in time. We've said it again. If it had been flipped around where this season was last season and last season was this season, you'd see that as a natural progression. It doesn't always work like that, of course, but that again is why it's absolutely key for them to bounce back in a way from what's happened over the course of the last few months. They've admitted the managerial appointment in December was wrong. This one can't be. They've got to get a really good run at this next season, get the recruitment right, because that has been a big question mark over certainly the last two windows, last summer and in January. There's only, you mentioned Joe Bellingham at the top of the show, there's only really him who's featured regularly, who's stamped his place in the team out of, 11, 12, 13 players across the two windows that were brought in. That can't happen again, especially if you then, like say, you're going to lose your key player in Jack Clark. There's got to be some significant improvement in the recruitment of players who are coming in, players who are ready to go in now. And I know that was another line that came out of the minutes this week. Christian's been saying that not every player that we sign is to go into the first team inside the first 6 months. The majority who come in the summer are going to have to be, because the lads who have come in at the moment appear as though they fit into that mould where they're not there for this first 6 months. Sorry, your likes of Romain Mundle, they're getting a look into the team in the second half of the season. It's towards next season where you think you're going to see the best out of players like him. In the summer, it's going to have to flip, where you're going to have players coming in to start at the start of the season who are recognised and established at this level.
Yeah, I think interestingly, obviously Job's just 18 as well. It's absolutely crazy. I've probably been victim to it myself, not of slamming the young lad, but when you watch him, it's so easy to forget that he's just 18 years old and he's scored 6 goals as an 18-year-old, playing in a number of positions. And like you say there, I don't necessarily disagree with Christian Speakman's comments of, I don't think anybody necessarily expects signings, when you sign younger players, to come in and them to play straight away. I don't think there's an expectation of that. I think it's more, we've spoke about it so many times, just needing the experienced heads. Now, again, we spoke about Bradley Dack earlier in this week, for example, of it being a signing that hasn't worked out. But it's just getting the balance in that. I think, interestingly, earlier this week, I think Love Supreme put something out on just an interview with Lyndon Gooch, and he speaks about, the likes of Dan Ballard, Dan Neil now being viewed as senior players. Dan Neil, someone who we spoke to about on that topic earlier before the international break. There's so many things at the minute that need to be addressed in the summer, and I think like you've said, it's just a huge summer in more ways than one, and it all starts with getting the right appointment in a head coach.
The thing is with that, it's interesting you brought that Gooch line up, because that is now Lyndon Gooch, and then You had Alex Neil come out and say that on an interview with the AFL Debate.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Beale said it in press conference to us. Michael Dodds has said it in press conference to us. Tony Mowbray referenced it before he was let go. There's a common theme here where players and managers who've been involved with the club over the course of the last 6 months, 12 months even, they can sort of recognise that there is going to have to be a little bit of bending, not necessarily breaking, just a little bit of bending in the way that they're approaching it. Now, it's great for the club, for the hierarchy to look at it and say, yeah, well, look at this. We fielded the youngest team in Championship history at Southampton, third youngest against Leicester, went toe-to-toe with them. That's great in hindsight, but if it's not bringing results, then it doesn't necessarily matter, does it? And you might have a lot of good players. You know, we speak about Job again there. As much as he has been open to some criticism this season, you know, he came out and apologised after that Southampton game. For me, I said it before, and I'll say it again, he's probably the last of Sunderland's worries at the moment. Because there's clearly a talented player in there. He's just probably been exposed to too much first-team football too quickly. Mike Dodds said it to me the other week. You know, we forget he probably should still be playing developmental football. You know, he should be a little bit like Chris Rigg coming in and just dipping his toes into the water every now and then. He's come in and he's been like you say, across so many positions. So he's the last of Sunderland's worries at the moment. Can there be improvement? Of course, can be. But he's 18 years old. You would expect that to come. There's plenty to take out of Joe Bellingham this season. Certainly, the first half of the season to be encouraged by. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and just the amount of people that have said that though, who've been involved in the club, just strikes me at the moment. Now, it could be seen. You know, some people might say, "Oh, it might be sour grapes, players, managers leaving, and things like that." Not involved. It's easy for them to say that. But it's quite consistent. And when you're getting people in the building saying it as well, you know, head coaches have sat there in press conferences and sort of reference, you know, we need one or two additions. We need a little bit of experience in around it. It has to be taken on board at the hierarchy level. It has to be in the summer. Otherwise, you're going to face the same problem next season.
I think perhaps the most confusing thing is that, as you've said there, Tony Mowbray spoke about it. Michael Beale spoke about it. I think everyone's been able to see this, but the January transfer window just gone. We didn't really see any change in tact there. Like, it's fine to say Callum Styles has played over 100 appearances at Championship level. He's just turned 24. Mm-hmm. You're talking with the greatest respect. I mean, what sort of experience has he had of being in a promotion winning side of to go up to the Premier League is what I mean, rather than obviously Barnsley. I'm well aware they've, you know, been League One promoted up, but it's those types of players, and I know they come at a cost and they come at a premium. The transfer window we saw this year didn't really address any of those issues either, did it? So that's perhaps the most confusing thing, especially when, you know, Mike Dodds came out when he mentioned that you know, that comment there about fielding the youngest side. He came out, a week or so after and said, well, we don't actually want to be fielding that. Yes, some can view it as an achievement, but I did a piece on it. What does that mean? You don't get an award for winning that. That doesn't put you in the playoffs or automatic promotion. What does that even mean?
Yeah. How many times has the youngest side got promoted? I don't know the answer to that question.
No, maybe.
How many times has the youngest team been promoted out of the Championship? It'd be interesting to look at. You guess and speculate that it's not a high percentage. Look, I mean, it is nice to see, and it's great to give young players a chance. And I do agree with them in a sense where they say, if you're a young player, Sunderland is an attractive proposition because you're clearly going to get game time. You know, you look at a Chris Rigg, look at a Joe Bellingham. That is a sort of standard. I mean, look at a Jack Clark, for example, him coming in 2 years ago. So it is an attractive proposition in that sense. But you've got to balance that up then with, do I want to get promoted? You've got to see evidence of Sunderland kicking on and trying to be breaking, not necessarily breaking into the top two yet, because that is a tall order. There was a piece went out this week, you know, the financial sustainability model and teams coming down from the Premier League, you know, the parachute payments. It's going to be really tough, not just for a team like Sunderland coming out of League One over the last 2 years, but for the majority of the division to try and close that gap. But at least be consolidating in that top six. This season they've been flirting around the sixth position for the first half of the season, then they were just totally dropped away. And you know, a lot of that will be down to experience, you know-how in the Championship. When you get into that winter period where it's a tough slog of games, Saturday, Tuesdays, the busy schedule over the Christmas period into the new year, if you don't get them reinforcements in January, like you touched on there, which can give you that boost going into the final couple of months, you kind of see what's happened this season can happen. Will they be better from it next season? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help here and now, does it?
Yeah. It would be remiss of us as well not to obviously mention the injuries, because of course they have played their part. There was an update obviously in midweek heading into this clash with Cardiff. Mike Dodds came out and said, look, I think he's hit the nail on the head, to be honest. You've got Corey Evans, Bradley Dack, Adji Elise and Pat Roberts. All right, Pat Roberts' injuries and Adji's maybe less long-term. But yeah, just treading cautiously with them coming back in. We'll go through our sort of predicted teams in a bit, but just having those four, even in the match day squad, is a huge, huge boost. Not just because you look at the bench and think, I've got options here, but it's just having those senior heads like Evans. And again, I know, Dak certainly hasn't set the world alight since he moved here, but it's just having those experienced heads around the squad on a match day, isn't it?
Absolutely. We spoke about it after the QPR game, didn't we? I think there was 3 academy lads and Chris Rigg, four of your substitutes there. So just being able to turn around. And I can remember Michael Beale's quote, I think it was the Newcastle game, the Derby game, where he got asked, think you could change it, when it went 2-0 early in the second half, and he turned around and, to paraphrase, he said, I looked along the bench and they got younger and younger and younger the longer I went along the line. And that's kind of been it all season, hasn't it, really, because of some of the injuries. The injuries have played a huge part. I think, yes, they can be used as a cheap get out in some circumstances, but I think Mike Dodds is right, and he's justified when he says, have any of the previous head coaches had to deal without Patrick Roberts and Jack Clarke at the same time? No, they haven't. And obviously Clarke, his durability's been immense since he's been with Sunderland. He's barely missed a game. Yeah. So this is a bit of an anomaly for him. Roberts is one that struggled a little bit this season, hamstring injuries that obviously hasn't been able to quite sort out. So it's interesting to see what they'll do with him over this final stretch, because yes, you want him to get back in, but you certainly don't want him to have another setback going into the summer, because you're going to need him to have a really good pre-season fitness-wise to get back up to speed in the next season. But yeah, having these players back in and around, you would like to think can only help. And that's not, again, it's not a slight on some of these young players, because there's obviously talent in some of these players, at developmental level and coming into the first team, when we've seen from the likes of Chris Rigg. But they just need that little bit of guidance around the building, around the dressing room, away from home, how things go on the team bus, in the team hotel, just getting into that swing of things properly, how experienced players do things, that can rub off on players and have a good impact.
Yeah, and then obviously just 2 final little bits of injury news. Obviously, Jack Clarke, it's probably too early for him to be involved this weekend, Mike Dodds said. And another one, Nazari Rusin, he's set to be out for the next couple of weeks, I think. So, which leads us on nicely into our predicted teams. If you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe. Comment below with the team you'd like to see. Want to pull yours up first, Joe? Since you're
we don't know. We don't know how each other's picked here, do we? So it'll be ironic if we pick the same team. But I think we'll see one of them come back in, these injured players. And I've gone with Bradley Dack. He's featured probably the most in the 21s, hasn't he, over the international break. I was torn between playing him and Job through the middle up front. It's quite a tough one to think how they'll approach this week. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Job is seen as the striker. Al-Shish drops back in and Mundell comes in on the right, so to speak. But I just think, given the comments about what we've just been speaking about, experience and getting some of them back in, I think one of them might start. And I think Bradley Dack might just get a look in for maybe an hour or so through the middle. Then you can swap that with Job. I think Al-Shish did enough against QPR to keep his shirt. Now, the interesting thing with this is, obviously, Al-Shish is obviously better as the 10 from what we've seen. He seems to be more comfortable in that role. So this would be a little bit narrow with Barr, like we saw. I think it was against Swansea. I know that didn't work in the first half, but there is a little bit of flexibility there with how you can play that. If that was the way to go, I think at least it would probably be too soon for him to go in at left back. So I've kept Yelder there, obviously, O'Nien and Ballard back together, which will be hugely important this weekend. They've been a big miss. I think they've only played once together under Dodds, and that was against Leicester. So, and Pierre Ekwa coming back in as well. Dodds said that Ekwa will play one of the games, he'll start one of the games this weekend, and I think it'll probably be this one. Just given what the situation is like elsewhere. But like I say, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if we see Mundell out there, and Dak on the bench, Job as the striker, and Sheesh moved into the middle as a 4-2-3-1 to kind of cancel out what Cardiff set up as well. They seem to favour that setup themselves in recent weeks. Key battle will be down that right hand side. Perry NG's their biggest goal contributor. I think he's got 10 goals and assists this season, so that's big ask for Hjelde down that side. And they're a threat from set pieces as well with Joe Rawls. Something again which Sunderland have been a little bit susceptible to. That certainly in 2024, 6 of 13 games they've conceded, and there's a piece on that on We Are Sunderland if you want to check that out as well. So yeah, that's what I've gone for. Dak to come in for his first game since Boxing Day. Echo back in the side as well.
Interestingly, I'll just pull my team up now. We've both gone with a sort of back four. Now, again, I've gone with the same sort of back four. Patterson and Go, Hjelde at left back, Ballard and 09, and Hume. I've gone with Equa coming back in as well, alongside Dan Neil. This is where we sort of change things up a little bit. Now, obviously, we've seen Mike Dodds set up with sort of a... It's been a strange one to sort of decipher and figure out what's what. In possession, they seemingly go to a back three, don't they, with Hjelde filling in as a left centre half and Hume is way up the pitch. I agree. I think Sheesh has played okay since he's come in. I think perhaps since Pritch has left, they've lacked that little bit of connection between the forwards, and in midfield, they just seem to obviously knock the ball down wide a lot. I'd like to see Mundell just stay in the side. I think he deserves one sort of shot. I've gone with Job up front. I just think it'll be too early for Bradley Dack, but I do think you'll probably get minutes off the bench. I think Barr's actually played better on the right-hand side from what we've seen this season. So I have been a little bit surprised to see him actually playing out on that left-hand side of the pitch. I don't know about you. I just think at Ipswich in particular, I thought he was actually really good. He had a really good half. He did a lot of defensive work. Just mentioning that Ipswich game, if you look back, it's like bizarre. Like Sunderland... It was very much one of those games where Sunderland, tailor two halves. We've seen it a lot this season. Then you flit forward to the QPR game, and that was just poor for the whole 90 minutes. So that's what I think. Well, I think, yeah, that's what I think we'll go with this weekend.
It wouldn't surprise me if that is it. That was what I was alluding to there. I think if Dak doesn't start, that would probably be my 11.
Yeah.
I just think with getting the players back, you might be tempted, and given the run they've been on, fresh out of a window, international break, might just try and spring a surprise. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was the 11 that we see starting on Friday.
That being said, though, we haven't actually seen Job play up top yet, have we, since Dodds has taken over? So I think I got 10 out of 11 the other week. But then again, it's just, at the minute, it's just a bit of a guessing game. I mean, Mike Dodds said, look, every team that he picks, again, he reiterated it at his press conference, every team that he picks is well thought out. It's not a gamble. So yeah, I think there's a couple in there though that just need, they need a performance. I'm not suggesting, they need the 10 out of 10, but they just need a bit more towards 7. They need a steady away performance. I think Leo Hjelde's maybe one of them. He's struggled a little bit in recent weeks. Pierre Equa, look, he's dropped out of the side. Mike Dodds has spoken about him. There's one or two I feel like they head to Cardiff with a bit of a point to prove, don't they, this weekend?
No, I agree, and I think Job is possibly one of them as well, just to contradict ourselves a little bit. I thought it was interesting the comments this week in the press conference about him being taken out the England setup and given that refresher. That tells me that he's firmly in Mike Dodds' thoughts to start this game this weekend. No, obviously that he has been anyway, but I'm really interested to see how he performs on Friday, just given that break and taking out the limelight a little bit from the England setup, and he can go full in at it. Beyond that, I agree with the two that you mentioned. Hjelde hasn't really set the world alight, has he, since he came in? Again, I think it's been difficult out on the left for him. I think he is more suited to being in that centre half, possibly as a 3, which we haven't had much chance to see. And Equa, the discussion around him was that, he's clearly got potential, but at the minute it's just that, and you sometimes have to have a conversation with a player like Pierre Equa. So again, it's an opportunity for him if it is going to be him that starts, whether it be on Friday or on Monday against Blackburn. When he does come back into the team, he's going to have to sort of, I don't want to say really prove it, but he's got to sort of stamp his authority on the position, because it's been shown over the last couple of weeks that he's not undroppable. You've just got to hope that is taking the right way for him over the international break as well, and not starting the 2 games before there. So, but across the board, I mean, the QPR game was so flat, so flat.
Yeah.
At least in the Southampton and the Leicester games, there was spells where they got back into the game, or they threatened to get back into the game, and as Mike Dodds said, they did go toe to toe with them. Now, look, it wasn't necessarily in terms of creating loads of chances, which we need to see more of, but we need a more just full 90-minute performance, a consistent performance across the board. Now, that is going to be tough. Away games in the Championship are tough, but they need to see a little bit more consistency in games rather than just a period of games. You've got to start in games. You can't just have little 10 or 15-minute spells and then get dominated in spells as well. You've got to really try and get the grips with the game, and like you said, go and put on an away performance and try and come away with something.
Yeah, I know XG isn't everybody's cup of tea, but obviously we're partial to a bit of stats every now and again over on We Are Sunderland. Again, it's sort of tactical analysis that you're not going to get anywhere else with Stats Bomb. That's sort of told quite a telling tale, hasn't it, over the course of the past couple of weeks. Now, obviously, XG is based on, compares thousands of shots beforehand of a similar sort of position, to the shot that's been taken. Sunderland's XG has been, there's no beating around the bush. It's been pretty dismal in the weeks gone by. But that tells you the story, like you've touched on there, of the lack of sort of clear-cut opportunities and chances in the final third in the box, and it's plagued Sunderland all year round. There's been discussions about the strikers throughout the season. Jack Clarke obviously has the highest XG in Sunderland's side, and they've missed him. But it's just in terms of shots in and around that area. I think Dan Ballard, just since the start of Mike Dodds' interim tenure, we pulled it up the other week, and Luke O'Nien, his header, which obviously was a goal, but aside from goals, that header against I think it was QPR, that's the best chance they've had, clear-cut chances. They're not really getting shots off in and around the box or from open play. They've struggled to create shots from open play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the XG's fallen off a cliff, hasn't it, since Mowbray's exit? I think there was only twice this season under him where it was below 1. Since then, I think they've had double figures, so it tells its own story, and it's a big issue. And you mentioned Jack Clarke there. We spoke about it, I think, in last week's show, where one thing his injury's done is shown up the sort of limitations of the squad elsewhere, because even in games where he's not necessarily, you wouldn't say that he's standing out, you just still think something can happen, and 9 times out of 10 he is creating something where those numbers are then getting boosted. So, but that's what I mean in terms of performance and consistency in games. They've got to start testing teams more, whether it be from creating chances from open play or set pieces. I'll go back to set pieces again this week for this Cardiff game in particular. Is going to be interesting, that battle, because Cardiff, I think they've scored the most from set pieces this season, so dealing with it in their own box will be a threat at the other end as well. I think they're underperforming their own XG from set pieces by a couple of goals. So it's absolutely, attacking going forward, which has been the issue all season. They need to try and find some sort of cohesiveness and test teams more than what they're doing, because at the moment goalkeepers, they're not having enough to do, whether that be even at the Stadium of Light or away from home. Away from home sometimes you can allow for it, but even at home, not a shot on target against Queen's Park Rangers, man. You can't believe that they did that.
Still giving you sleepless nights, that.
Well, I think it is for everyone, isn't it? Dodds referenced it, didn't he? It's still, you can still tell that knocked him, didn't it? That game, even though it was the first point that he picked up. So even from that aspect, you want to see a bit of a response from that. Some players might have turned around and thought, well, we got a point here. How's our worst performance? We lost the other 5. Go and prove it. Go and put performance in, and that's what everyone sort of needs. Fans, the staff, the players themselves, they all need to go and get a bit of consistency here.
I think we've said it before, didn't we? Before they even picked up a point. If you picked up a point at Southampton, then you head into that game with QPR just with a platform to build off, and it's easy saying this could have happened, that could have happened, but if they picked up a point at Southampton, you're then going into that QPR game, albeit, to use Mike Dodds' terminology, the players aren't skipping down the corridors, but you go in with a little bit of, we've stopped the rot, we'll go into this game. Now that's Cardiff away. And again, look where they are. They've shown signs this season. They were in form prior to the Derby game with Swansea. it's an opportunity Sunderland have to beat sides that are around them now. And you know,
these 3 games are all against
exactly.
teams that are in and around them. So this is the time where they need to snap that run and get a win out of these 3 games, because then right at the start of the show, like I said, you're going into, after these 3, Leeds and West Brom away, which is as tough as it gets almost. So if you don't get a win out of these 3, it could become a little bit tetchy towards the end of the season, which is just unnecessary and almost unthinkable, you know, at the turn of the year, because the turn of the year, Sunderland were still very much involved in the playoff conversation. Yeah. Even after Mowbray's exit, they were only 3 points adrift of the playoffs. So they need to just get one of these wins, and these 3 games are undoubtedly the best chance to do that, you'd feel.
Yeah, definitely. We'll draw an end to it there. So if you have been watching over on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what team you'd pick for this afternoon's game against Cardiff. If, you know, we are Sunderland still live. It's a place to be for everything red and white, tactical analysis, exclusive interviews and insight from former players. Our competition's still up and running. You've got just under 2 weeks to enter that. It's just £1 for 6 months worth of subscription. And you could win hospitality tickets for the final day of the season against Sheffield Wednesday. Catch you later on.